Anxiety is as addictive as Coke.
The thing about you as a therapist is I feel like you always just know what we need. Can you talk us through what kind of mess society is in terms of anxiety levels?
There is an addictive component to anxiety because it comes with a promise of safety.
I think there's a worry where they think, who am I without anxiety?
These are the behaviours that are getting in the way of your life. There's a lot of false promises out there. I think actually no one's coming to save you.
But if somebody is still in an addiction to anxiety, what do they do?
I think the first thing is,
I'd had a general anxiety all my life. I was an anxious parent. My hands were so tightly wrapped around the steering wheel of life.
how do you feel about the anxiety now?
Oh God, sorry.
There's so much not knowing in our lives. I think a lot of people are very frightened. So you have to.
Wow.
This is about you taking responsibility for your life and making the decision that you're not going to abandon the little person within you that's frightened. This is exactly what I could have done with when I was anxious.
You've just literally nailed it. I'm so excited today to be talking to Owen O'Kane because weirdly we met online because I loved lots of his posts and then, I was recommending his books to everybody and we became friends online and we've always liked each other's posts. I've even given him a quote for the front of his new book. I respect him so much. So I'm so excited because we've never actually met. I would love it if you could subscribe and give it a little like, please. I just quickly want to say congratulations on publication day.
Yes. Addicted
Today.
to anxiety, yep.
I've had this for a bit. It's hilariously, I've turned over. I didn't have a highlight pen.
See, that terrifies me because I am looking at all of the
and you're thinking,
the bookmark.
What do you think? Why have I turned that over? Do you know?
Like a proper journalist.
Well, no. The thing for me is these are turned over for personal use, not that I want to talk to you about. These are turned over for pages.
They're not your questions.
No, these are turned over for me. Oh, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read that again.
God.
Okay, there's lots of things I'd like to say about this book.
There's a lot, isn't there?
First of all, the font size, thank you.
It's good, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, they did a brilliant job. They did a really brilliant job. That was one go.
Of what, the font size?
Yeah. Well,
I'm so grateful. It's so easy to read.
They were all of it actually, the kind of design of the cover and stuff, I think they had a really good flavour of me, the publisher, and they knew what the book was about. The brief was clear. And I said, I don't want this to be airy-fairy. I don't want it to be fluffy. I don't want it to be typical self-help. I just want this to be really clear-cut.
Yes.
And they said, okay, leave it with us. And they come back and I just said straight away, oh my God, that's it.
And so, because the other thing that I love is I love a list.
Oh, yes, plenty in there, isn't there?
There's so much to get at.
Yeah.
And a list is easy to look at. You think, okay, the few pages beforehand are going to be explaining something, and then at the end there's like a sum up.
Bit of a summary.
Yes.
But often that's what you have to do with people in therapy. Often, like, you might have the bigger issues or the big conceptual stuff, and you're always kind of covering the content, but then you're always going back and you're like triple checking, okay, did you get that? Do you want me to just go over that again? I just want to be sure that you're with me in this. So I'm always that's how I work. I'm always kind of recapping and making sure that I'm not moving too quickly and someone's alongside me rather than jumping ahead. So when I sat down to write that book, I really thought about, okay, here was the premise. So I thought to myself, what was, if I were writing a book about anxiety, what would I want it to be? And the immediate thought was I would want it to be the book that I could have done with in my 20s.
Yes.
So that was my starting point for the book. And I thought, there's a lot of stuff out there that is quite generic, or it's quite woolly, or it's kind of the false promises, really, heal your anxiety in a day and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, that's not going to happen. And in my early 20s, I wouldn't even have called it anxiety. I would have just called it feeling a bit off. And I remember not being able to make head or tail of it. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't really quite know what to do with it. And I remember thinking, okay, I want to write a book where this is really clear.
Yes.
This is what's going on. This is why it might be going on. So that it didn't matter what your background is. You would open it and you would get from beginning to end and think, okay, that's really clear cut. It's not academic. It's not. And and I know the academics will slag me off and say, oh, you didn't give enough theory or you didn't put all of that stuff. But it was never meant to be that. So I've laid it out deliberately where it's not even about, I guess I'm in the mindset of the reader who might be at home feeling stuck or feeling like I can't go out the door or I can't go to work or I'm just feeling horrible. So I kind of wrote the book thinking, okay, I want it to be for that person where they can go to it and it will be clear and they can bookmark it.
I mean, hilarious. Like, I've literally turned over 1,000 pages.
I know.
And I love the fact that before we were going to talk, you were like, oh my God, like you've turned over so many pages. I was like, don't worry, it's not questions, it's for me. It's so I can go back and find the bits that were pertinent for me.
That's amazing though, because, you know, that means everything, because when you write a book and people want to go back or it's made them stop or it's made them think, I mean, that's why we do it ultimately, isn't it? I mean, you want to have impact and you want to reach people. So if it's done that, then I've done my job.
Well, it's often something where I'll read something you've said and I'll think, I must remember that, but I know what I'm like. Yeah. And I'll carry on reading and I'll forget. And it won't just be what you've said. It'll be the way in which you've said it, the order of your words. And I think, wow, that is the best way I've heard that described ever. So I think I want to go back and remember that. So I turn over the page so it ends up looking absolutely crazy. But anyway, the other thing that I find so different about you as a therapist is you are so happy to talk about your own experiences.
I think you have to. I mean, I think it's one thing being a therapist and then it's another thing being a therapist and using platforms like podcasts, books, talks, TV, radio, all that sort of stuff. And I think, we're often asking people to share their lives, their story and all of that stuff. And I think you can't really, personally, I can't show up pretending I'm an expert. Well, I am an expert in what I do. Yeah. I've trained for years. Yeah. But I don't want to just, show up as the expert or the guru. I kind of think you have to show up with your humanity, because I have a belief that whoever you are as a therapist, if you don't build a relationship with somebody, you're screwed. It doesn't matter what they learn. It doesn't matter what techniques you teach them. The person you're working with needs to know they're in front of another human being.
Yes.
Who gets struggle. And I think, well, my life was very imperfect. I did have struggle. So kind of unapologetically, I thought, well, why would I push that down or hide that? Because it almost it's kind of hypocritical not to. And I thought, I'm not really ashamed. I mean, I spent a lot of time feeling shame when I was younger. Like massive shame.
This is what I love about this book, because anxiety is bathed in shame, isn't it?
Of course it is. I thought, well, if I'm going to do this work and I'm going to be brave enough to put it out there, then I'm not going to operate from shame. I'm going to operate from openness, honesty, integrity. And I've had people say, oh, is that a bit much? Do you want people to know that? People are, all of that stuff.
People level that at me all the time. Yeah. Is it too much? I'm like,
what's too much?
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be a personal thing, that, hasn't it? I'm okay with it, but you might not be okay with telling your thing, but it's okay with me.
I think in therapy, it's always about the client. So if you and I were in therapy together, it will be, it's about you. If every now and then I think I'm going to share this because I think it's important and it might create a moment of connection or normalize something, I'll do it. So therapeutically, it's always, always, always about the client. But I think when it's kind of more generic, and broad, I think I've got no problem, particularly in a book. I mean, can you imagine me trying to do this book?
Oh, no.
Without talking about the fact that I grew up anxious. My entire early years were anxiety filled and I didn't have language to describe it. And then I worked out what it was, and then I had to navigate my way through it. And then as I got older and I learned a lot more about anxiety, then I was able to add that on top and think, God, not only do I know what it's like, but I now understand the theory behind it. So it was kind of putting it all together. So, yeah.
And I think you have had, I mean, this book in itself, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but this idea of an addiction to anxiety is quite a new concept, but I think it's only because you've gone through it that you would be able to grasp that. I think it's I've experienced anxiety for the first time ever about like 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, and it was that's not true, actually. I'm lying. I was an anxious parent, I think, looking back now, having read this book. And also I was a control freak. And control is anxiety. It's the opposite of anxiety. my hands were so tightly wrapped around the steering wheel of life.
Yeah.
I was so scared, and I've been forced to let go.
Yeah.
And I have let go.
Wow.
And I feel fucking great.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so this has literally been a revelation to me.
Oh, good.
So thank you.
No, and I'm actually, it's really, really interesting. I'll tell you a funny story, actually. I can't say too much about it, but someone told me not to do this book.
Oh, do you know, somebody told me to not talk about the menopause.
There you go.
It's exactly the same thing. Touch me, Owen, touch me.
I was told, you know...
Because that's very interesting. What, because of the shame side of the anxiety?
There was just about, there was a conversation about, I don't think you should do that, and I don't think it'll do well, and I don't think anyone will be interested in buying that.
Can I just quickly say something? Because it's day of publication, and I'm going to blow your trumpet. Not a euphemism. Because your book came out today, and it's gone straight in at number 2, and you've only done one interview.
Yeah.
You did an interview this morning. After that interview, you went in at number 2.
So
high five.
And I think that is in part
because they told you not to do it.
And I think actually, when somebody tells me not to do something, it wasn't like in a defiant way. I think when I feel I'm right about something, I'm quite good at listening. If something intuitively feels right to me.
Oh, and you talk about energy in this book. I want to talk to you about that a little bit later, because you say, look, I'm not going to talk about it too much because that's not what this book is about. But knowing inside you, your intuition, it's always right.
Yeah, and it was right. And it's really, I've got much better at listening to that. It was kind of like, you can say no, and that's absolutely fine. You're entitled to say no, but I'm not going to listen.
I think that's what I first fell in love with you for.
Yeah.
Because I could see that in you.
Yeah.
And also that you always know, I feel like you always just know what we need. I mean, anxiety, obviously, it's a word that's been banging around for ages, but you talk in this book a little bit about we are in the age of anxiety. I mean, we're just this generation anxious.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through kind of what kind of mess society is in terms of anxiety levels?
I mean, where to even start? I mean, I think it's across the board. I don't think it's like particularly young people or teenagers or mums. I think, you look at every subset of the population and you find anxious people. I think we're frightened. I think a lot of people are very frightened in general. And I think there's a number of things, I think the world is a scary place and there's a lot of difficult things happening.
But what I think is interesting, I don't think it's any, if you think about the world at war in the 30s and 40s and how terrifying that must have been. But has social media meant that the world, because it's just as dangerous a place as it was back then, actually it's probably safer than it was back then, but we feel it's more dangerous. Why is that?
I think because we've evolved a little bit more. I think we've evolved in our language, our understanding, our ability to reflect, the ability to have conversations. So now things are much more like back in the day, like even back in my day, you just didn't talk about depression or anxiety or mood or even addictions. Things just weren't talked about. So things were buried and put onto the carpet, and there was very much a mentality of just kind of get on with it and plow through. Whereas I think actually now that really has started to evolve. So of course, the more aware people become, they then suddenly start to think, oh God, it doesn't feel quite right. So things then do feel a bit more threatening. And not only the external world, but I think people are starting to become more aware of their internal workings. Now, there's a double-edged sword here. I think there's a danger that people over-pathologize themselves. Because I think, when I hear people say, oh, I'm an anxiety sufferer, and I say, no, you're not, you experience anxiety. So I'm not interested in plying people with diagnostic labels, or I don't believe in the word disorders. I don't think anyone is disordered. I think we need to remove that. Anxiety disorders, depressive disorders. I think human beings fluctuate. Sometimes their mood can drop, sometimes their anxiety can increase, and sometimes we're in between. And other things can happen around that. But I think it's part of the human condition to fluctuate. And I think we've got to get much better at saying, okay, rather than see yourself as an anxiety sufferer or I'm anxious. No, you experience anxiety. And you're experiencing a very healthy, normal human mechanism. But sometimes that part of you, the scared part of you, works way harder than it needs to. And I think it's a much more helpful way to think about anxiety. And I do believe, and look, I know the addiction community, some people are going to, have a go and say, oh, it's not an addiction.
I disagree. Well, as a former addict,
yeah.
I can give you a little bit of an insight into that. I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think that addiction would be very easy to get addicted to. I can. When you were talking about that in here, I was like, no, I must talk to you about that and say, because addiction has its benefits.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
And I mean, anxiety has its benefits. That's what I was trying to say. So anxiety is helpful.
Yeah.
For me, low-level anxiety, cortisol, has that I've kind of had all my life with my mum being an alcoholic, ready for anything. Oh my God, are you going to streak? Are you going to get drunk? Are you going to arrest someone? My mum used to citizens arrest people all the time. Like, it was like, all the time. I was ready for anything.
Chaos, yeah.
Bring that to work. Amazing. Yeah. I'm so alert and on it and full of energy and like people pleaser.
Yeah.
Wants to do the right thing. I was like, I like this feeling. So it's that weird high that you can get from anxiety.
Yeah. And it's a lot.
You talk about that.
Yeah, and you've described that brilliantly there, because every addict I've ever met or worked with in my entire career will have a love-hate relationship with their addiction. So there'll be part of it is like, oh, fucking hell, I know I shouldn't be doing this and I don't want to do it, but I'm going to still do it. And you'll find exactly the same thing with anxiety, because they won't like the feelings that come with anxiety. But then when you try and take it away from them in therapy, they will resist you, they will fight you, they will fucking bring you down because they don't want to let go of it. And there's I don't know if you remember from the book, but there's this brilliant moment. And this book was born quite a few years ago before I even started to write it. So I was running a group in the NHS, and this was for like 16 people, chronic anxiety. They'd been everywhere, all sorts of treatment. The psychiatrist I was working with at the time knew I had an interest in trauma and anxiety. And he said, why don't you set up a group? These are people that some services have given up on. They've been everywhere. Why don't you set up a group and see what you can do with them? So he kind of gave me a free rein to work with them. And I said, okay, let's do it. So anyway, I set up this group, and about 8 weeks into the treatment, I noticed that they were all starting to improve, every one of them. Things were lighter in the room. There was a lot more banter. They were coming in, they were sharing stories. You could see there was a real sense of freedom starting to move into their lives. So me being the, responsible therapist at the time, I thought, okay, I'm going to feed back to them that I think, I really notice a good improvement. So I say to him, look, we 8 weeks into the program, brilliant to see everyone looks and feels and sounds a lot lighter than they were. And the minute I said it, it was like, fucking hell. Like, you wouldn't have heard a pin drop. It was just like deadly silence. And I said, what's the silence about? And this one guy who was a recovering addict, brilliant guy, and I remember him saying, fucking hell. He said, I thought giving up Coke was hard. He said, giving this up's hard as well. And then they all laughed. He said, this is as addictive as Coke. And then when we started to explore it a bit more, they were all able to acknowledge that the moment I named recovery meant that they were moving away from the anxiety, and that became frightening.
Yes.
So the letting go of anxiety became a real concern, and they all got what he said. But not only did they get it, I got it. And I remember thinking, there is an addictive component to anxiety, because it comes with a promise of safety.
Yes.
It's going to protect you. So even though it might feel uncomfortable in the body, in the mind, the emotional states, the behaviours, actually, if the alluring promise in the background is, I'm going to make sure that nothing happens to you. I'm going to make sure that you don't get rejected. I'm going to make sure that you don't feel. People really struggle to let that go.
I also think there's a worry with people where they think, who am I without anxiety? That has been a core part of my personality.
Shall I tell you something brilliant? This literally happened a few weeks ago. So I'm working with someone at the moment, chronic anxiety for a long time. Again, starting to improve, doing really good. And this person came into therapy recently. And she just sat there, and I said, I think I'm doing really good. I said, amazing. So anyway, we're just kind of catching up. And then she said, I had this really weird moment the other day that I'm a bit concerned about. And I said, what happened? And she said, I woke up And she said, for the first time in about 4 years, I didn't have a knot in my stomach. And I said, wow. I said, that's a big moment. She said, yeah, it was for about 5 seconds. And I said, and then what happened? And then she said, then I started to worry about where the knot had gone. And what would happen if what happens without this knot?
Yes.
How will I manage? And what if I miss something? Or what if I'm not as on guard? And I just kind of like, the examples can come from everywhere, but it's just another example of the attachment and the dependence. And, you know, this is the thing about this book. Look, I'm under no illusions. You know, I think it's a clear book to read, but there are moments when it's uncomfortable because it's like no one's coming to save you. No. There is no chant to, you know, you're not going to manifest your way out of anxiety. No. There is no kind of, you know, one day mantra and suddenly it's all gone. This is about you taking responsibility for your life. But more importantly, it's also about you going to a part of you, the scared part of you, and making the decision that you're not going to abandon that part of you anymore. And that's bloody hard because most people do abandon parts of self. And I think a lot of people, I've never in my entire career met an anxious person who has come to me. They sit down, they talk about all the symptoms, and I say to them, how do you feel about the anxiety? I've never once in my career heard anyone say that they feel aligned or positive or any affinity with their anxiety. It's the opposite. I think it's toxic. I hate it. I don't want this to be happening. So they have a really negative, almost hate-based relationship with a part of them. And that in itself, I said, but this is a scared part of you. Yes. It's a little person, little boy, little girl, you know, the little person within you that's frightened. And every single day you abandon that part of self by pushing it down.
Have you ever thought that the word anxiety has been demonized in some way? Like if you were to call it worry sounds more compassionate or softer or kinder, because we were talking about shame earlier, that you were told not to write this book, that in some way you're revealing something or you shouldn't be talking about it too much, that anxiety is still that emotional, so bathed in shame that we're embarrassed to say.
I think people know what it means. I think there's a double-edged sword. I think some people are using it out of context. I hear people describing anxiety and you think, actually, that's not anxiety. It's not clinical anxiety. Then at the other side of the coin, you do have people who don't want to acknowledge, particularly with men,
right,
this real thing about, you know, to acknowledge being anxious. You know, females are generally better. I think to be fair, right across the board with the mental health conversation, females are much better at kind of acknowledging some of their own vulnerabilities and struggles and actually bringing it to the table and saying, I could do with a bit of help and support. Men feel dreadfully here.
Starting something new can be a bit terrifying, can't it? Whether it's a business, a side hustle, or just finding the courage to share ideas online. The actual hardest part is often taking that first step. Our sponsor, Adobe Express, the quick and easy Create Anything app, turns "Where do I begin?" into "Look what I just did." With customizable templates and powerful features like generative AI, it makes creating everything from social posts to presentations feel so simple. If 2025 is the year you're finally saying yes to your big ideas, in fact, let's say 2025 is the year you're saying yes to your big ideas, Adobe Express makes it so easy to just jump right in. And it's free, so no excuses. Head to adobe.com/UK/express or search in your phone's app store to give it a go. It's that easy. I'm excited because I'm going to introduce you to my new show sponsor, Ancient and Brave. I love a secret weapon. Well, this isn't really a secret because I've been banging on about it for years. It's collagen, and more specifically, Ancient and Brave True Collagen. It's been part of my routine for years, and it's completely tasteless, odorless, and dissolves in anything. Coffee, tea, smoothies, even just water. But this is why I swear by it. Collagen levels naturally decline as we get older. I know, it's so unfair. And that basically affects everything: skin, hair, joints, muscles, you name it. But true collagen helps keep everything strong, supported and glowing. But what really sets them apart is that they're a B Corp and members of the 1% for the planet, which means that 1%, actually now 2%, of all their sales goes directly to environmental causes that protect our planet. So if you fancy giving it a go, here's a little secret for you. Get 20% off your first order at ancientandbrave.earth/planet using my code BEGINAGAIN, all in one word.
And I think there's a big conversation around why that happens, but I think men just generally feel to acknowledge or to admit any symptoms like this whatsoever means that I'm weak.
Yes.
And I can't acknowledge weakness, and I can't in any way be demasculinized. I can't admit this, so they bury it, and it becomes a shame-driven narrative. So it's a complicated one. So I think it's a word that, I mean, the reason I decided to go with the word anxiety in the title was it's a word that everyone gets and understands.
Well, I mean, that is the word that we would all associate with it. I just wondered if it was that word that people associate such negative things to.
Well, here's the thing. When I worked in the NHS, I was setting up these group programs I talked about, and we were setting up these 12-week programs at one point. And one of them, at the beginning, we called the first group Managing Your Depression, and the other group we called Managing Your Anxiety or Chronic Anxiety or something like that there. And this was a new big thing that we were doing, and we got no sign up. People wouldn't register for the groups. We weren't getting anywhere. I'm like, God, this is quite worrying. People are not coming forward. We're offering these treatments. They're evidence-based treatments. They weren't coming forward. And I remember in a meeting one day saying, I wonder if we change the names of the groups. Should we try it? It's worth a go because people are not coming forward. So the anxiety group we changed to Manage Your Worry. And the depression group we changed to Balance Your Mood. And the groups booked out in no time. Because then it was less, that's okay, I wouldn't mind improving my mood or balancing my mood out.
It's not seen as weak.
It just was like, this is everyday stuff. Everyone knows that everyone worries. Okay, let's focus on that. And people know that sometimes your mood can fluctuate a bit. That doesn't feel as clinical. It doesn't feel like it's as judgmental or shaming in any way, shape or form.
God,
so it's kind of almost like a collusion of like, so we were almost colluding with them to get people to come for treatment. Yeah. Whereas I thought when I'd done the book and I said, no, we're at a point now where people know what anxiety means. And people can pick up a book and they can hide the cover.
I mean, I think Addicted to Anxiety, I'd like to thank, I'm on the cover there with the Force for Good endorsement.
Well, thank you so
Owen.
much.
It's a real pleasure.
We've had, the endorsements have been incredible, across the board.
I'm not surprised,
We've had,
actually, for you.
I'm really pleased about that.
But I think, I've got lists of people that I'm sending this to because, I think it's a very, very easy to access and easy to use and easy to understand book, this was what I love about it. But we've talked a bit about how you got here and how the book started. But can we just touch on like this addiction aspect of it? And obviously I know that when, I've only had this experience once of, I know that I grew up as an anxious parent and I know that I was running on cortisol. I don't know what you would call that, high alert all the time, like hypervigilance, which I feel has disappeared since my operation, which is weird. It might come back.
Yeah.
But for me, it's actually made me feel like
you can breathe.
Yeah, it's so odd.
Are you enjoying it?
I am learning to cope with it because I often feel like, where's that?
Yeah, looking for that.
I was always like that. It's like
being wired, isn't it? Like literally hardwired.
And trying to explain that to someone's very difficult.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But I'm trying to reprogram my whole life around not.
But what an incredible thing though, because you could reframe it in a way and think actually there might be moments where this state is incredibly useful for you.
Yeah.
And actually within that, because I think often we associate success, achievement, getting stuff done. I think we often associate that with being wired
Well, that's
and ready for action, where actually it could be that there's real power in this state.
I mean, obviously you're a therapist, you're brilliant, and I know, but you've just literally nailed it. Like for me, I feel like I've done great so far living with this thing, but now you talking about your subconscious, I keep hearing things that my subconscious is telling me or guiding me or telling me. I couldn't hear it before.
Yeah. But you've kind of turned the volume down and you've created space.
Yes.
So it's allowing stuff to come up.
But how if somebody is still in an addiction, what do they do?
I mean, I think that in the context of this book, which is about the anxiety, which I do believe is a massive, massive issue, as I've said earlier. I mean, I think the first thing is, like any addiction, it's the acknowledgement.
Yes.
That, okay, this is problematic. I can have a rule of thumb. It's really hard, but it's hard for me. I mean, Christ, and sometimes even if I'm being like brutally honest with myself, I can still get moments where anxiety will move in like a tidal wave, sometimes unexpectedly. Now, here's an example. I mean, this is hilarious. My friend, like one of my friends was really taking the piss yesterday, in fact, about this. So I'm involved in this massive project at the minute, which I can't really say too much about, but it'll be announced soon. And
Wait, is it exciting?
It's really exciting
For you?
Yeah.
For us?
Yeah,
The public as well?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm great.
It's really exciting, and
You can't talk about
It's
it.
TV stuff, and it's big, but I can't really
Okay.
say much. But anyway, it was big for me, and I had to really push myself out of my comfort zone. And the book clashed with this thing at the same time. So basically, I was doing clinical work and loads of other stuff, and I had this big project that I've been working on, and then book release coming. You're doing all the press interviews and all.
Yes.
So I was really aware of my own threat mechanisms going through the roof. Just almost in the background, they were just kind of like, oh my God, exposure, exposure, exposure. Now, for somebody who's primarily hardwired to stay off radar,
Yes.
little gay kid, don't want to get spotted, don't want to get seen,
Yeah.
play it down, don't let anyone notice who you are. Here I am as a middle-aged man now in this situation thinking, what the actual fuck?
Yeah.
How have I ended up in this? It's almost like, talk about life playing tricks and, call it whatever you want, but the universe ironically placing you in positions. You think, I would never have willingly, genuinely have chosen where I am, even though it's brilliant and it's a real privilege and I love what I'm doing. It's kind of almost like, I've been, it's almost like I've gone the other direction. It's probably the stuff I probably could have been doing when I was a young kid. If I wasn't living in an environment of fear, I probably would have been way more creative. I play piano and stuff.
If you hadn't been in the environment of fear,
Then I wouldn't do my job.
You wouldn't be here now.
And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So it all just, it's weird how it all evolves. So none of it's a mistake. I really do believe that wholeheartedly. Nothing that we experience is a mistake. Nothing. That doesn't mean that it feels good or that it's been a comfortable period, but I do believe that we can all salvage stuff along the way. And I think if we get victimized and we believe this is wrong, it's not fair, it shouldn't be happening, that shouldn't have happened, then we do then kind of go into these lower energy states. Whereas actually we think, okay, what if this is part of my growth? What if this is part of greatness? What if this is something that evolves and I can transcend? Then you're working with it in a very, very different way. And I think I learned that without even having that language. I think I learned that very early on.
Yeah, God.
That I found a way through adversity. So the other day, all of this was kicking off, and suddenly I had a really bad day, I think it was about a week ago, and I thought, I feel really anxious. And I thought, the irony, I'm feeling really anxious, and I'm fucking bringing out an anxiety book next week. And then I noticed my imposter moving in and my critic and all of these mechanisms that we all have thinking, oh my God. And my friend was like properly taking the piss about this.
I love friends
And
like
she-
that, by the way.
Yeah, she
Can I
said,
just
do you know
say,
what you need to do?
Go on.
And I said to her, why don't you read your own book? Do you know what I did? I read it because I thought they're my words.
Yes.
And they're words that I want to impart, and I believe in every syllable in the book. And I reread the book. And I read it really quickly, and I thought
Which bit spoke to you particularly?
the fact that there was totally understandable that in a period where things were elevated and there was a lot going on, that my natural threat mechanisms would raise up, because these protective parts of me will come out. And that's exactly what should happen. So actually there's nothing abnormal about this state at the moment. And it was just that moment of clarity of thinking, of course.
It also is like, give yourself a hug for taking care of yourself. Like,
it's just like,
well done you.
Yeah.
You're looking after yourself. You've got your best interest at heart.
And if I were working with a client and they had a big project on, they had a book coming out and they were just a bit off, and they were feeling a bit anxious, I'd say, well, I get it. It's a big deal. You're out there and you're speaking to a lot of people in interviews and back to, you know what it's like. You're on the go. Of course you're going to be a bit stressed and a bit more anxious than normal. That's a totally, totally normal reaction. But my own kind of perfectionist and my own critic come out, which was fascinating when you watch that part of you coming out thinking, no, you shouldn't be experiencing that. But you learn to get to know all of these parts of yourself. But it's funny, like they will all sometimes come up and you kind of learn. But this is where the whole power, I think, in when you get to know who you are and how you operate, the real power is. And this is why I think it's great when you were saying about slowing down and noticing that you don't need to feel as wired or vigilant anymore. When we step out of that, then you create space to almost begin to watch yourself. So you become the observer rather than get entrenched in all of this here. And you can start keeping an eye on how you're operating in the world and kind of thinking, all right, I need to bring this down a few notches.
Do you think that's partially getting older?
I mean, I think it depends. Sometimes I meet younger people who've got a lot of insight. I think it just depends on what life teaches you at any given time. I mean, I don't know about you, but I sometimes, you think you're together, don't you? Like at all stages of your life, you think, oh, I've got it worked out now. I've got the mortgage and the dog and the partner and the car and all of that. And then you sort of look back and you think, I didn't really know anything back then. At the time, it feels like you've got it all worked out. And I kind of feel like I almost can look back every 5 years and think, God, I really thought I was quite sorted and stuff then. I'll tell you the one thing, and I don't like using the word spiritual, but I mean, I do think I kind of worked against spirituality for a long time. It started off very Irish, very Catholic, good boy, altar boy, went into a monastery. I mean, I went the whole 9 yards with it.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I'm not going that route. And then just kind of reclaim more of my humanity, I guess, for then my adult life. And I've arrived at this really, really funny point now where it's kind of almost feels like I've moved into kind of more, actually there's sometimes real value in that. There's real value in stillness and quiet and...
I wonder whether that's an age thing too, because so many of my friends from sort of, I would say, 40s, mid-40s onwards, it's everything slightly changes. We are more in tune with ourselves. We listen. I loved you talking to yourself. You know the answers to all the big questions.
Yeah.
That's such a spiritual concept.
Yeah. I think it's about it's really about learning to listen. Like properly listen and start trusting yourself a lot more.
Yeah.
And that very often I think does mean that you go off track and that you upset people and that you piss them off. Because I think people get used to, if you're a people pleaser, and I think we probably both are at various levels or have been at various points in our life, and we do what we do, and your career is very different to mine, but we're with people all of the time. But we're interacting the whole time, and we like to talk to people and we're interacting the whole time. But I often think that people then develop expectations. People are happy with you, I think, when you're fulfilling their needs.
Yes.
And you're playing your old traditional role. But then the minute you stop doing that because you think, actually, that isn't right for me anymore, and it was never right, you sort of then, you can see who isn't able to cope with that, or they don't adjust very well to it. And I think the older we get and the more we evolve as people in life, if we start to lose people or they start to drop off or relationship changes, I don't see that as unhealthy.
No.
I think it has to.
I mean, I feel like everybody changes a little bit as life goes on because of life experiences that we have. And I think, I like to think that I've been myself a lot of the time. Yeah. But I have had this kind of urge as well this year, the end of last year, this year, of kind of I want to be me, like authentically me. And that might not be like
Might be
exactly
different.
who I was last year. And the interesting thing about that is what you just said about, I might upset people sometimes, and I would never upset somebody on purpose. I would never kind of go out of my way to upset somebody. But if I don't want to do something, I can just say no.
Yeah.
It's like I've never heard that before.
And there is that great expression, you know, every time you do, like every time you just go along with things for the sake of it, or you're saying yes when you want to say no, and you're rocking it. I mean, I used to meet people for dinner that I genuinely didn't even want to see, but I didn't want to upset them or let them down and stuff. But you have to think that when you do that, but you end up abandoning yourself.
Yes.
You know, and that is the bottom line.
Yes.
When you do that, Dora. So I think you get to that point, you think, I'm not really prepared to do that anymore, because I did a fair bit of that when I was younger. And I think the book talks about that a lot as well.
It does,
You don't abandon self. You know, that I think that has to be key for everyone, because that's the one relationship that we are stuck with. You know?
And one other thing that you touch on, which I really love in the book, which we mentioned very quickly earlier, was energy. And I know that in the book you go, I'm not going to talk about this too much here because this book isn't about energy, but I feel like that's a real tangible thing I can feel at the moment. Can you just talk me through your what you mean by energy?
We're all we're all energetic beings. Like, I don't want to get too scientific about it.
There's science behind that.
There's science behind it.
Yeah.
But you even know sometimes, when you meet somebody, I don't know if you get this something, but sometimes you meet somebody and you just, like, within a millisecond, you pick up on their energy.
Totally.
You're there with them, and you can't even, you may not even be able to put words on it, but you just get an energy about them. You get a sense of them, and you know where they're operating from. And sometimes that can feel really inviting and warm and safe. And you can instantly think, oh God, I really like being around this person. And then you can meet somebody and you can feel the opposite, because their energy is operating at a very, very different level. So we're intuitively picking up on that all of the time with each other. And I think when it comes to anxiety, I mean, energy states and even emotional states, they need a rite of passage. So there has to be a beginning, middle and end.
Yes.
So there's a natural flow state for all of us, whether it's emotional states or energy states. And that natural flow is that we literally have to get out of our own way.
Yes.
To allow these states to pass. But going back to that whole thing about control, is most of us do the opposite. So what we do is we jump in and we try and control. We try and control the emotional states, and we try and control the energy states, either to be the version of us that we think is going to be most accepted, or to please people, or to do what we think is the right thing. So what we end up doing the whole time is we just end up interfering with natural energy states.
Yes.
Because we're literally getting in the way. And one of the big things as a therapist, like the biggest part of my job is, I would say, if I were to simplify being a therapist, what you're doing with most people is thinking, you fucking need to get out of the way.
Yes.
I need you to get out of the way. In the way you're thinking, and the way you're dealing with the emotions, the behaviours that are getting in the way of your life. So it sounds the weirdest thing in the world, but you're taking the individual out of the way so that they can clear the obstructions.
To me at all.
Yeah, that's when I'm working with someone, like every person that comes into your room, like I would say, I haven't measured this, but I'm confident it's about 99%. Every client I work with will come in and they will sit down in front of me and they will say it's all shit and feeling awful and the usual stuff. It'd be life, and they will give me concrete, valid reasons why it is. Their childhood, their background, their job, their money, blah blah blah, their career, and they will talk about all this stuff. I have never ever in my career have someone sit down in front of me at the beginning and say, I'm in a really shit place because of how I'm managing my life. Never. So you never really get that ownership or responsibility. So most people project everything outwards.
And of course, you can't do anything about what's out there.
Yeah, you can't.
The only thing you can do something
about
is
the internal stuff.
There's
that brilliant expression, the way out is in. And
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, so
I love that.
I do, and I think it's a brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant way of thinking about it all, because we're all doing it. We're trying to control. Not anxiety. Anxiety by definition is an intolerance of uncertainty. So, if you think of it broadly, we're all struggling with the fact that we don't know.
Yes.
There are things that we don't know. You've been through a massive life event where there was a period of not knowing.
Yeah.
Your life was turned upside down.
Yeah.
So you've just come out of a period and still working through a period, I'm sure. It's like, oh my God, there's so much not knowing in our lives. And most people find that really, really hard to tolerate. So there's a real clue for me in the word, the intolerance is a big thing. So the more tolerant we can become, then I think the more, not only the calmer and the more steadier do we feel, but I think these energy states then align much more. Where it's like, okay, can I just be okay with not knowing? Yesterday, for example, I knew the book was coming out today, and you're feeling that pre-angsty, jittery.
Yes.
And I kind of said, can I be okay with not knowing where this is going to go? And I was okay. Can I just hand over? I don't know. I have no control. There is no predictability.
Total letting go.
Just can I let this go and be okay with the fact that the work's done? I've shown up. I'll continue to show up. But outside of that, I need to get out of the way.
Yeah.
You know, literally, this has got nothing to do with me now. I need to just do the bits that I need to do, but I need to get out of the way. So, you know, that's a great place to be, you know, I think, when you get out of your own way.
I've never thought of it like that. I've got a really good visual in my head now.
Of that, just
of the way.
The step. Well,
like the way is a road for me.
Yeah.
And I'm big and I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I've got to kind of stand to one side.
It's a hard thing to admit. It's hard, isn't it? Because most people don't want to acknowledge that, because, you know, if you are willing to acknowledge that, then you're left with a choice. Shit, if I'm the one that's creating a lot of the challenges and creating a lot of the obstruction, that also means that I have to do something about this.
Yes. And also, if I don't, I'm the only one I can blame.
Yeah. It's a double-edged sword in some ways, but then the freedom.
But I was just going to say, the freedom that comes with that is ridiculous.
Absolutely.
It's life-changing.
Yeah, because then you can stand back and think, okay, this is got, you know. And I guess really, just thinking as you're saying that, actually, I guess really, even though I wouldn't have put it in these words at the time, I guess really that's what I was learning, I think, in my palliative care days.
Yes.
I was learning that these people were adjusting and coping and managing because they were getting out of the way.
Yes.
They were getting out of their own way. I hadn't formulated that before, just in my head today. I'm thinking that's exactly I guess, the information and the lessons I was getting back then. And that's why they were able to just cope, manage, and find peace.
Wow.
You know? And I wouldn't have thought about it like that, but now as I'm speaking it out loud, I'm thinking, shit, that's exactly, that's what happens. You know? So things can be a lot simpler, I think. And this is the whole thing.
This is what I love about this book.
It's about hope, isn't it? And
I mean,
simplicity.
I think it's practical, it's helpful, it's got big font. I'm still loving you for that. But it is a pick it up, put it down. It's a turn over the page or get a highlighter.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that, actually.
And I think because people who struggle with anxiety, sometimes in this book, I love it when you talk about a relapse with an addiction. You know, you can have a relapse, but it's how do you get through the relapse? You can get through a relapse fine, but it's nice to pick up, put down, pick up, put down. I'm going to just thank you, really. Thank you for all the books that you've done.
Thank you.
And
I've loved this chat. It's been great. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
And for all the good that you do, you know, it's a beautiful thing to have someone in the world. And I know, like, you're slightly out of your comfort zone sometimes with, you know, the online stuff or the talks that you do. But I'm really pleased you're doing it, not just for me, but for everybody that gets to experience you.
I just see it as, I see it as work. It's just work. And it's still my job. It's like, you have a job to do as a broadcaster and journalist, presenter, and your work plays out in different ways. I mean, I think, if there's a power greater than this here, they've got a very great sense of humor, because I'm fucking way out of my comfort zone a lot of the time.
At the end, I was going back to work on the 15th of January, and I had been in bed for 2.5 months. On and off, I'd gone for a couple of walks a day, then gone back to bed, or seen friends, but I'd been housebound. And I could feel work looming, but I was terrified. I really didn't want to go back, and I was like, I'm not ready. I can't do it. all of these voices, like your voice, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore. What happens if I can't remember the script? I'm not going to be able to. And my partner's going, this is the last step. This is what you need.
Yeah.
You will feel better when you go back to work. The fury I had towards him, who I adore,
Yeah.
every time he brought it up, I'd be like, you don't understand. It made me understand people. When somebody just says, because this is not what this book's about. It's about being a bit more compassionate and understanding, but at the same time being practical about it. And I thought, I used to be of the school because I'd never experienced anxiety acutely like that. I'd had a general anxiety all my life, but I'd never understood what it was like to feel frightened, leave your home, or to walk on your own, or to go out to a social. I know loads of people who are frightened in crowded areas. I've never had that. I've never really worried in that kind of way. And I was always a bit, you've just got to go and do it. It's quite harsh that, now having experienced how I felt. It's quite a different way of looking at it.
But then I think it changes everything then, doesn't it? Because when you've walked the walk in some way and you think, actually, no, I mean, taking a step out the door might be enormous.
It felt like that to me. Although I have to say, at the end of the first day that I went back to work and I sat in my car.
Yeah, I saw you
sobbing.
With relief or?
With, oh God, Owen, sorry.
Okay. Good.
With pride.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have felt that pride if I hadn't had the anxiety. I was terrified. And I did it. And it felt really good.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing though, isn't it? That the anxiety in that whole experience was, even though uncomfortable, not easy, it was all part of that.
But I look back at it as a gift.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I
think
it was
that's
just
brilliant for people to hear, because anyone who's listening to this today will probably think of their anxiety as an awful thing or something debilitating or something that's getting in the way of their life. But actually, what if, that is beautiful the way you described that. What if there is a lesson? What if there is a learning? What if there is a gift in it that you can work with and use and move forward with your life in a way? And that's the liberating thing. I see this in different ways every single day, where I see people really, once they kind of find that independence and freedom and trust, and then you think they sometimes I'm really gobsmacked at where people end up and what they do, and you're just like, oh my God, it's just like watching people take. I'll tell you what's lovely about it is you're always working with people at different phases. So sometimes you're with people at the beginning when it's just everything's awful.
Yes.
And then you're watching that progressive stage, and then you watch them literally soar and take off. So you're always working.
People come back.
Oh yeah, always. Yeah. I'm very. Do you know? It's really funny you say that. I was going through notes yesterday, and I was just sending an update. Like a email update thing to previous clients. Send the book. I always do it when a book's coming out. To send the books out if you're interested. And I've been incredibly. I've worked with some really, really nice people. Look, people have challenges and difficulties and stuff, but I always end up in front of I guess you find, regardless of what's going on, I think you just find a decent human being in there.
In everyone.
You find it anyway, but
What's interesting is you worked in A&E, and I always think A&E must be so difficult because you save someone's life and then they leave and you never see them again. And therapy is a bit like that. You get to the root of something, you work through something together, and then they leave.
Yeah,
and you think,
they do.
Are you okay? But they come back.
But then occasionally you see something. I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning this because I talk about her in one of the books. But a lady I work with very tragically lost one of her children.
Yeah.
I think it was the last book I talk about her, and she's now gone off, and her daughter died very tragically, and she's 17, 18 years grieving, wasn't getting anywhere with her grief. And when I worked with her, we discovered that there was real significant trauma around the loss of her daughter, were actually, it was almost a version of PTSD.
Yeah.
And that she'd never processed the trauma. So actually she'd never really been able to grieve the daughter
Yes.
over the 18 years. So our work was about helping her resolve this trauma, which we got there with. And then she was able to start grieving, and the sadness came. And then she was renovating her house at the time, and the daughter's room had never been touched in 18 years. And she came to me in session one day and she said, the builders are asking me what I'm doing with my daughter's room. And anyway, we talked about this and what the builders getting into the room meant. Anyway, we negotiated. Her daughter had a disco ball that she wanted to keep. So the negotiation with the builders were that they had to keep the disco ball, but they were allowed to work around all of that. So anyway, she turned the daughter's bedroom into an art gallery, an art studio, because she loves to paint. Wow. And funny, I had an email from her last week saying she's got an exhibition coming up in the next 2 weeks. Would I come? So of course I'll go and see it. So occasionally you'll work with somebody, and then I think they got where it's their exhibition and you get to see their work, but you know where that work came from.
Yeah.
That work.
Yes.
So
yes.
you go into that gallery and you just see
means
this
so
incredible
much.
work. And
Yeah.
you kind of think, I know where that came from.
Yeah.
And I know what enabled her to do that. It's not just a case of her rocking up and doing an exhibition. There was a lot of pain and a lot of graft, and there was a lot to get through to do that there. So I think, with our own suffering, our own struggle, if we're willing to see that as a way of I think we can transcend most stuff if we're willing to work with the pain. Or I heard somebody describe it beautifully once, like even in these moments that are a bit dark or heavy or there's struggle going on, what if instead of just thinking, oh God, this is here, I don't want to feel it, what would it be like to look at it and think, oh God, this is more stuff that I need to clear.
Yes.
And if I let this clear and I let this pass through, God, I'm lighter, and God knows what, there's great stuff here. So it's a very different way of seeing suffering.
I mean, it's interesting because it's like admitting a problem and then becoming willing to let go of it, which is exactly, we talk about addiction because that's the kind of what
addiction.
we did with drugs, what I did with drugs, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Owen.
Thank you.
I love you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
I've really, really enjoyed this chat, and I know this book is going to help so many people.
When I was talking to the guys yesterday about when we were planning this here and we were going through the schedule, I said, I don't even think you need to worry about this. I knew confidently. I said, yes. I promise you. I said,
I kept saying to people, I know Owen. He's my best friend.
I said, you don't need to worry about this. I said, we don't need to really plan this too much. I promise this will evolve and it'll do. And I knew
I hope that everyone I talk to will feel like that, but I knew we would because I know you.
Yeah, no,
it's worked weird, and you know me.
I felt exactly the same.
Can we give Owen a round of applause, please? Bloody great. I love my chat with Owen. He's such an easy person to talk to. And again, I think he's really great at delivering actionable tools, giving us tools that we can use to help us combat anxiety. And the way that he talks about it, that makes us feel like it is something that we can have control over. So if you liked that episode of Begin Again, I would love it if you could subscribe and give it a little like, please.